The first time I spoke Sicilian in front of Marco Bellomo, I was holding a tray with 2 espresso cups, 3 dessert forks, and every unpaid bill of my life folded behind my name tag. The private room at Bellomo's was warmer than the rest of the restaurant, but not kinder. Amber lights hung over a long table of men in dark suits. Their plates were untouched. Their voices were low. Their watches cost more than my car, and every time one of them looked at me, I remembered I was wearing shoes with cardboard tucked under the soles. Marco sat at the head of the table without leaning back, without raising his voice, without wasting a movement. That was what made him terrifying. Not the black SUV outside. Not the 2 men by the door. Not the way our manager, Rocco, kept wiping his palms on his pants like he had forgotten how hands worked. It was Marco's stillness. Like the whole restaurant had been built around the possibility of him saying one word. I kept my eyes on the saucers. Espresso, gentlemen. One of Marco's men smiled without warmth. Careful. She might spill it if the words get too fancy. A few chuckles moved around the table. I swallowed it because rent was due Friday. Because my landlord had already left 2 messages. Because girls like me learned early that pride did not keep the lights on. Then the old man near Marco lifted his head. Salvatore Bellomo. Marco's father. He was smaller than I expected, wrapped in a dark wool coat even though the room was warm. His hands trembled around a silver spoon, but when he looked at me, the laughing stopped before anyone told it to. He said something in Sicilian. Soft. Sharp. Meant for the table, not for me. One of the men laughed again and translated badly. He says the waitress looks frightened. But that was not what he had said. He had said, some people carry fear like bread. They do not complain because they are hungry. The words hit me so hard my fingers tightened around the tray. My father used to say that. Before I could stop myself, before fear could drag the sentence back down my throat, I answered in his dialect. Not everyone who is hungry is weak, signore. Some just learn to feed others first. The room did not go quiet all at once. It broke apart piece by piece. A fork paused above tiramisu. Rocco's smile collapsed. One of the men near the door shifted his hand toward his jacket, then thought better of it. Marco looked at me for the first time. Really looked. But his father was the one who reached for the edge of the table like the past had just put a hand on his shoulder. His eyes dropped to my apron, where the outline of my old silver lighter pressed against the cloth. Then he asked, in English this time, "Girl, what is your family name?" My mouth went dry. Because in that room, my last name was not a name. It was a warning. Rocco stepped toward me fast, his voice too bright. She's nobody, Mr. Bellomo. Just temporary staff. Marco did not look away from my face. Let her answer. And that was the moment I understood something terrible. I had not just served the wrong table. I had reminded a dangerous family of a name they were never supposed to hear again. I did not answer Marco Bellomo right away. For 1 second, all I could hear was the tiny rattle of espresso cups on my tray and the blood rushing in my ears. My name sat behind my teeth like a match near gasoline. Vitale. My father's name. The name my mother stopped saying after men crossed the street to avoid us. The name that made landlords ask for 2 months' rent up front. The name that made old Italian men lower their voices when I walked by, as if shame could be contagious. Rocco moved between me and the table before I could breathe. I said she's temporary, he repeated, forcing a laugh. Agency girl. Doesn't know the house rules yet. Marco's eyes slid to him. Not fast. Not angry. Just enough to make Rocco's collar darken with sweat. She understood my father, Marco said. Rocco's smile twitched. A lot of girls learn a few pretty words for tips. Something in me burned at that. Not loud. Not brave. Just old. My father had taught me Sicilian over soup that was more water than broth. He used to make me repeat the hard sounds until I got them right, then tap the table twice and say, "Never let anyone call your tongue borrowed." But I was not that little girl anymore. I was 27 years old with $43 in my checking account, a final notice from the electric company folded in my purse, and a landlord who had started calling before breakfast. My left shoe had a split near the toe. My car needed a new alternator. I had taken 2 doubles this week and still owed the pharmacy for my mother's blood pressure pills. So I lowered my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should get back to service." Marco did not give permission, but Rocco grabbed my elbow and steered me through the swinging door anyway. The kitchen hit me with heat, garlic, lemon, dish soap, and the sharp metallic panic of being watched. The line cook glanced up, then looked down too quickly. The dishwasher stopped spraying plates. Nobody asked what happened in the private room. At Bellomo's, questions had consequences. Rocco dragged me past the prep station and into the narrow hall outside his office. His fingers dug hard enough to bruise. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. I answered a question. "You performed." He shoved me toward the wall. "For him. For his father. Do you understand how stupid that was?" I pulled my arm back. "Don't touch me." That made him smile. Not because it scared him. Because it amused him. From his desk, he snatched a single sheet of paper and slapped it against my chest. The words were already printed. My name was typed at the top. Employee statement. Theft of cash from private dining room. My stomach turned cold. I didn't steal anything. "You're going to sign it," Rocco said. "You got confused. You took money from the table. You panicked. I'll tell them you're sorry, and maybe you leave with your last paycheck instead of a police report." The hallway seemed to tilt. "You printed this before I walked in there." His face changed for half a second. Then he stepped closer. Poor girls with dirty family names should be careful about sounding smart in front of powerful men. Behind him, through the small window in the kitchen door, I saw one of Marco's men standing near the service station. Watching. Rocco noticed my eyes move. His hand dropped to my apron pocket, right over the hard outline of my father's silver lighter. And his voice became almost gentle. "What else are you hiding, Nina?" Rocco's hand stayed on my apron pocket. I felt the lighter beneath the cloth like a heartbeat I had been trying to hide for years. It was the only thing of my father's I still carried. Not because it was valuable. The hinge was loose, the silver was scratched, and the flint barely sparked anymore. But his thumb had worn one corner smooth, and when I was scared, I could feel that smooth place through my apron and remember that he had once been real. Before he became a story people whispered wrong. "Take your hand off my apron," I said. Rocco's eyes flicked to the kitchen door. Or what? He wanted me loud. He wanted me shaking. He wanted one of the cooks to hear me sound guilty before anyone asked what actually happened. So I did the only thing my father had taught me to do when men tried to turn truth into noise. I got quiet. "With respect," I said, "you just accused me of theft with a statement that was printed before anyone reported missing money. If I sign it, I become your mistake." His smile disappeared. Behind us, the restaurant kept moving, but differently now. Plates crossed the path slower. Servers lowered their voices near the wine station. The hostess stood at her stand with a phone in her hand and fear in her shoulders. Bellomo's was not just a restaurant. Everyone who worked there knew that. It had white tablecloths, framed family photos, and a hand-painted sign out front that tourists thought was charming. But the older men who came through the side entrance never gave last names. The private room upstairs was never listed on the reservation sheet. And when Marco Bellomo walked in, even the customers who did not know him seemed to understand they should laugh softer. Rocco understood it too. That was why his fingers trembled when a voice behind him said, "Let her go." Marco's man stood at the end of the hall. Broad shoulders. Black suit. No expression. Rocco pulled his hand away from me like he had touched a stove. She's upset, Rocco said. I'm handling it. Mr. Bellomo wants her back in the room. My stomach dipped. Rocco snatched the paper from my hand and folded it once, fast, before sliding it under a stack of schedules on his desk. Then he grabbed my apron strings from behind. What are you doing? I asked. Private service requires clean uniforms. He untied the apron with sharp little pulls. You can wear a fresh one. No, the word came out before fear could soften it. Rocco paused. The man in the black suit looked at me. My face burned. My order pad is in there. It was a small lie. The pad was in my back pocket. Rocco knew it too. His eyes narrowed, and for a second I thought he might drag me into the office and shut the door. Instead he yanked the apron free and turned toward the storage shelf. The lighter slipped out. It hit the tile with a sound too small for the whole restaurant to hear, but somehow Marco Bellomo appeared at the hall entrance as if the floor itself had called him. He looked down first. Then at me. Then at the lighter. Rocco bent too fast. Just junk from her pocket. Marco's shoe stopped him. Not on his hand. Not touching him. Just close enough that Rocco understood distance had become permission, and permission had been denied. Marco crouched and picked up the lighter himself. Under the kitchen light, the old silver flashed. The tiny Bellomo crest on the side caught like a secret refusing to stay buried. For the first time since I had entered that restaurant, Marco's face changed. Not much. Enough. He turned the lighter in his hand, and I knew what he had seen. The shallow engraving inside the lid. The Sicilian words my father used to trace when I was little, telling me some promises survived even when men did not. Marco did not read them out loud. From the dining room, Salvatore Bellomo called something in Sicilian. His voice was thin, but it reached the hall like a command. Marco's fingers closed around the lighter. Rocco stepped between us again, suddenly pale. She stole that too. I was just about to report it. And before I could breathe, he raised his voice toward the kitchen. Everybody stop. Nina Vitale is being questioned for theft. When Rocco shouted my name, the kitchen stopped pretending it had not been listening. A spoon clattered into the dish pit. The hostess lowered her phone. One of the bussers looked at my apron on the floor like it had become something contagious. Nina Vitale. There it was. Not whispered. Not hidden. Not folded behind my name tag where I could pretend I was only Nina from table service and not the daughter of a dead man people still blamed for blood. Rocco lifted the folded statement from his desk and shook it once. Cash went missing from the private room, he said, louder now, performing for the cooks, the servers, and the men in dark suits gathering near the hall. And this was found in her apron. Marco still held my father's lighter. He did not hand it to Rocco. That small refusal made Rocco's face sharpen. It has the Bellomo crest, Rocco said. You all see that? She walks into a private family dinner, speaks a few words she shouldn't know, and suddenly she's carrying stolen property. Heat climbed my neck. It isn't stolen. My voice sounded too small against the tile and steel and all those watching eyes. Rocco smiled like he had been waiting for that. Then explained how a waitress living paycheck to paycheck ends up with something from this family. A few people looked down. Not because they believed him. Because they were scared of being seen not believing him. That was how men like Rocco survived. He never needed everyone cruel. He only needed everyone afraid. My gaze dropped to my shoes, the cheap black ones with cardboard under the soles. I thought about my electric bill. My mother's pill bottle on the kitchen counter. My landlord's voice telling me he had other applicants who could pay on time. I thought about how quickly one police report could become an eviction, how quickly a dirty name could become proof. Rocco stepped closer and lowered the paper in front of me. Sign the statement, he said. Admit you took cash and that lighter from the room. I'll say you cooperated. Maybe Mr. Bellomo will be merciful. I looked at the blank line waiting for my signature. My hand shook. Marco saw it. I knew because his eyes moved to my fingers before they moved back to my face. Not with pity. Not with impatience. Like he was counting the cost of every second I stayed standing. Then he looked at Rocco. The accusation is yours? Rocco nodded too quickly. I'm protecting the family. No, I said. The word surprised even me. Rocco turned. I could feel every person in that hall waiting for me to shrink. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Fear pressed on my ribs until breathing felt expensive. But my father had not taught me his language, so I could use it only when powerful men found it charming. I lifted my chin. I'll apologize if I served the wrong table, I said. I'll apologize if I offended Mr. Bellomo's father. I'll work the rest of my shift without tips if I have to. But I will not sign a lie. Rocco's mouth tightened. You don't get to choose. I do if the lie needs my name. Something moved through the hall then. Not comfort. Not safety. Just the first crack in the story Rocco was trying to build. The line cook looked up. The hostess stopped pretending to scroll. Even one of Marco's men glanced at Rocco instead of me. Rocco felt it too. His voice dropped into something uglier. Careful, Nina. Your father made the same mistake. Thought truth would save him. The words hit harder than any hand. Marco's expression changed by almost nothing, but the man closest to him stopped breathing through his nose. Salvatore Bellomo had been brought to the hall now, leaning on a cane, his old eyes fixed on the lighter in his son's hand. Rocco pointed at me. She comes from traitor blood. That is what she is hiding. I felt the room pull away from me. There were insults you could survive if they landed on your own skin. But when they dug up the dead, they found the child in you and hurt her too. Marco turned the lighter over. His thumb lifted the lid. The tiny hinge gave its familiar weak click. Inside, the old Sicilian words caught the kitchen light. Salvatore whispered something from the doorway. Rocco quickly said, he says the inscription proves betrayal. I looked at the lighter. Then at the old man. Then at Marco Bellomo, who was watching me like he had just realized the most dangerous thing in the room might be a waitress who could read what everyone else wanted buried. My throat tightened. That's not what it says. That's not what it says, I repeated. My voice should have failed there. Rocco wanted it to. He wanted the whole kitchen to see me standing under fluorescent lights with cheap shoes, trembling hands, and a dead man's name hanging around my neck like evidence. But the lighter was open now. And the words inside were not just words to me. They were Saturday mornings in our old apartment, my father shaving at the kitchen sink because the bathroom mirror was cracked. They were steam rising from a pot of lentils. They were his rough finger guiding mine across letters too small for a child to read. Marco held the lighter out, not to Rocco. To me. He did not say, prove it. He only said, read it. That was worse somehow. Because no one in that restaurant had ever asked me to read anything except an order ticket. I stepped closer. Rocco moved like he might block me, but Marco's eyes cut to him, and he stopped. The inscription was worn almost flat. A careless person would have guessed. A man trying to control the room would have twisted it. But my father had taught me the old dialect, the kind that sat low in the mouth and carried grief differently than Italian did. I looked at Salvatore Bellomo first. He was watching my face, not the lighter. The words are old Sicilian, I said. Not clean Italian. Not something you learn from a phrase book. Rocco scoffed. Convenient. I ignored him, though my knees felt weak under my skirt. It says, bread given in hunger is not debt. It is blood remembered. The cook by the stove lifted his head. One of Marco's men frowned. Rocco laughed, but it came out thin. That's poetry. It doesn't prove anything. No, I said. It proves you lied about what his father said. His smile vanished. I turned back to Salvatore. When you spoke before, you didn't say I looked frightened. You said some people carry fear like bread because they are hungry. The old man's hand tightened around the top of his cane. I kept going before fear could catch me. That is the same idea as the inscription. Same structure. Same family saying, probably. Not betrayal. Not theft. Not some warning carved into stolen silver. Rocco stepped close enough that I smelled his aftershave. She's making herself sound important because she got caught. I looked at him then. Really looked. You mistranslated him because you thought no one in this room would question you. A small sound moved through the kitchen. Not shock. Recognition. Everyone who worked under Rocco knew that tone. The smooth one he used when he changed schedules after they were posted. The helpful one he used when tip envelopes came up short. The friendly one he used before reminding a girl how replaceable she was. But knowing was not the same as speaking. Speaking could cost rent. Speaking could cost pills. Speaking could cost the job that kept my mother's prescription waiting at the pharmacy under my last name. Rocco leaned toward me. You think a few old words make you safe? No, I said. I think the truth should be translated correctly. Marco's thumb rested on the lighter's hinge. His face gave nothing away, but his attention had weight. For the first time, it did not feel like a spotlight waiting to burn me. It felt like a door held open just enough for my voice to pass through. Why do you know this dialect? He asked. The question landed softly, but it cut deeper than Rocco's shouting. Because the answer was my father. And my father was the wound everyone kept pressing. My family spoke it at home, I said. Rocco snapped. Her family was thrown out of every room worth entering. Marco did not look at him. Your family name, he said to me. My throat closed. Rocco smiled again because he knew fear had found me. In my purse, my phone buzzed once. Then again. Probably my landlord. Maybe the pharmacy. Maybe another reminder that courage did not pay late fees. I looked at the lighter in Marco's hand, at the old crest worn silver by years of my father's thumb, and then at Salvatore Bellomo, whose eyes had started to shine with something too painful to name. My name is Nina, I said. Rocco exhaled like he had one. Then Salvatore spoke in Sicilian, so low that only someone listening for the dead would have understood him. He said, ask her who her father was. Marco's gaze sharpened. Rocco's face went gray. Rocco going pale frightened me more than his anger had. Anger was easy to understand. Anger came with a raised hand, a slammed door, a threat you could brace for. But fear on a man like Rocco meant there was something in the room he had not planned for. And Marco Bellomo noticed. His eyes moved from Rocco's face to the lighter, then to his father's hand wrapped around the cane. Papa, Marco said, his voice low enough that everyone leaned in without meaning to. You know these words. Salvatore did not answer right away. The old man looked smaller in the kitchen doorway than he had in the private room. The steam from the dish pit curled around his coat. The fluorescent light showed the deep lines around his mouth, the yellowed bruising on his knuckles, the thinness of a man who had outlived too many people he was supposed to protect. Then he lifted one trembling finger toward the lighter. My brother used to laugh at that phrase, he said in English. Said only hungry men make bread sacred. No one moved. Rocco recovered first. Mr. Bellomo, with respect, this is sentimental nonsense. The item was found in her apron. Marco turned his head. Because you removed her apron. Rocco's mouth opened. Nothing came out fast enough. I looked down at my bare waist, at the place where the apron strings had been. Without it, I felt exposed, like he had stripped more than cloth from me. That apron held my pen, my order pad, my tip slips, the lighter I touched when I needed courage. It was ugly and stained and cheap. It was also the last place I still felt like myself at work. Marco held the lighter out again. This time he placed it on the metal prep table between us, not in my hand, not in Rocco's. Between everyone. The lighter stays there, he said. No one touches it unless I say. It should not have comforted me. It was only an object on a table under harsh kitchen light. But for the first time that night, the thing my father left me was not being snatched, mocked, or called stolen. It was being protected long enough to be understood. Rocco saw it too. His voice sharpened. You're letting a waitress put words in your father's mouth. Marco did not raise his voice. I'm letting my father hear them correctly. The sentence landed harder than shouting. Salvatore took one slow step into the kitchen. One of Marco's men moved to help him, but the old man waved him off. His eyes stayed on me. Say it again, he said in Sicilian. My heart kicked once. The inscription? No, his jaw trembled. What you answered me at the table. I swallowed. Every reason to stay silent pressed against me. The job. The rent. My mother's pills. The way my landlord looked at me like compassion was an expired coupon. The fact that if I was wrong, if my father had lied, if my childhood memories were only the gentle version of an ugly truth, I would not just lose a shift. I would stand in a mafia family's kitchen and accuse their history of being incomplete. But Marco had not asked me to be loyal to him. He had only made space for the truth. So I looked at Salvatore and spoke the words again in the dialect my father had given me. Not everyone who is hungry is weak. Some just learn to feed others first. The old man closed his eyes. His face folded with pain so sudden I almost reached for him. Marco did reach, but only to steady the back of his father's chair when one of the servers pushed it close. He did not perform tenderness. He made room for it. Salvatore sat slowly. My wife said that once, he whispered. After a winter when we had nothing but stale bread and pride. Rocco cut in too quickly. Old people remember things wrong. The kitchen felt colder than the walk-in. Marco's stare settled on him. Be careful. 2 words. Rocco heard the warning inside them. So did everyone else. But he was cornered now, and cornered men do not always retreat. Sometimes they grab the nearest person and call it defense. He pointed at me. She studied your family, Mr. Bellomo. That's what this is. Her kind always knew how to survive by pretending they belonged near power. I flinched before I could stop myself. Marco saw that too. Not the insult. The flinch. The tiny, humiliating betrayal of my own body. He stepped half a pace, not in front of me, not claiming me, just close enough that Rocco would have to look through him before speaking to me again. She answers what I ask, Marco said. No one threatens her for it. Rocco's eyes flicked to the lighter on the table. Then to the kitchen door. Then to me. And I realized he was not only afraid of what I knew. He was afraid of what Salvatore might remember if I kept speaking. Salvatore opened his eyes again. They were wet now, but clear. What was your father's name, child? Rocco slammed his palm on the prep table. The lighter jumped against the steel. Enough, he snapped. Ask her why her father sold Bellomo's secrets to the men who came for your family. Rocco's palm stayed on the prep table, inches from the lighter. The steel still rang from the hit. Nobody in that kitchen pretended anymore. The servers stood with plates cooling in their hands. The line cook let a sauce burn at the edge of the pan. Somewhere in the dining room, a customer laughed once, then stopped when no one joined him. Rocco had said my father sold Bellomo secrets. He had said it like a fact. Like a headstone. For most of my life, that was how people spoke about Antonio Vitale. Not as a man. Not as a father who patched my backpack with fishing line because we could not afford a new one. Not as the man who gave half his dinner to the woman downstairs when her heat got shut off. A traitor. A warning. A name you did not sit beside in church. I looked at the lighter on the table and forced myself to breathe. The confession was printed before the money was missing, I said. Rocco gave a bitter little laugh. Listen to her. Now she's investigating. No, I said. I'm remembering. Marco's gaze did not leave me. That was the strange part. A room full of people had been watching me all night, but he was the first one who made watching feel like listening. Rocco pointed toward the back hallway. She needs to leave. Now. Before she embarrasses herself in front of your father. He moved toward me fast, grabbing my arm again, harder this time. His fingers found the same tender place. I gasped before I could hide it. Marco's voice cut through the kitchen. Take your hand off her. Rocco stopped, but he did not let go. For one stupid second, I thought he might challenge him. Fear had made him reckless. Sweat shone above his lip. His eyes kept jumping to the lighter, to Salvatore, to Marco, as if the room had become a trap he was trying to measure. I am protecting your family, Rocco said. That girl walked in carrying your crest and speaking your father's language. Her father was poisoned to this house, and she knows it. Then let her answer, Marco said. She's a waitress. She is the one being accused. That sentence changed something in me. Not enough to make me safe. Enough to make me stand. I pulled my arm free from Rocco's hand. My skin burned where he had held me, but I did not rub it. I would not give him the comfort of watching me soothe what he had done. You keep saying my father sold secrets, I said. But you won't let Mr. Bellomo's father hear my name. You lied about what he said at the table. You lied about what the inscription meant. And you tried to make me sign a theft statement before anyone asked why a waitress would steal a lighter she has carried since she was 16. Rocco's face tightened. That's a pretty speech. It's not a speech. It's the part you keep interrupting. A few of the staff looked at each other. Small looks. Dangerous looks. The kind that meant doubt had entered the room and found a place to stand. Rocco saw it happening. He shoved the folded confession toward Marco. This is what matters. Not bedtime stories. Not dialect. Her signature goes here, and the problem ends. Marco did not touch the paper. No, he said. That paper is your problem. Rocco's mouth opened. Marco stepped closer to the prep table. Not loud. Not rushed. But every man in that hall adjusted around him like the walls had moved. My father asked a question, he said. You keep answering for her. Rocco looked at Salvatore. Because she's using an old man's grief. The cruelty of it made the kitchen feel smaller. Salvatore's hand trembled on his cane. For a moment, he looked so tired I thought he might let the past close over him again. Then his eyes found mine. Child, he said. Your father's name. Rocco snapped, she already told you enough. Marco turned his head once. One of his men stepped away from the door and stood between Rocco and the back hallway. No threat spoken. No weapon shown. Just a path quietly closed. Rocco understood. So did I. There would be no dragging me out through the staff entrance. Not yet. My phone buzzed in my purse again. The sound was small and ordinary and almost cruel. Rent. Medicine. Bills. The life waiting for me if this room decided I was trash. I thought of my mother's face when she heard our last names said in public. The way she always looked down first, like she expected the floor to accuse us too. Then I looked at Salvatore Bellomo. My name is Nina Vitale, I said. My father was Antonio Vitale. The lighter sat between us. For half a second, the old man did not breathe. Then his cane slipped from his hand and struck the tile. He whispered my father's name like it had been locked in his chest for 20 years. Antonio. Rocco lunged for the lighter. Marco caught his wrist before he reached it. And Salvatore Bellomo, shaking so badly one of the chairs scraped beneath him, pointed at the silver crest and said, "Open it again." Marco opened the lighter. The small click of the hinge cut through the kitchen harder than a shout. Rocco's wrist was still trapped in Marco's hand. Not crushed. Not twisted. Just held with such controlled certainty that Rocco stopped pretending he had power in that room. Salvatore leaned forward in his chair, one trembling hand reaching toward the silver. "Closer," he said. Marco brought it to him. The old man did not look at the crest first. He looked inside the lid, where the Sicilian words had been worn thin by my father's thumb and my own. "Bread given in hunger is not debt. It is blood remembered." Salvatore's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For one awful second, I thought the memory had failed him. I thought my father would stay dead under the wrong name. I thought I had risked everything, my job, my rent, my mother's medicine, maybe even my safety, for an old man's grief to turn away from mine. Then Salvatore touched the inscription with 2 fingers. "Antonio carved this," he whispered. "With a pocket knife in the back of my brother's bakery." My knees almost gave. Rocco yanked against Marco's grip. "He's confused. He doesn't know what he's saying." Marco did not look away from his father. "Speak." Salvatore's eyes lifted to mine. And for the first time in my life, someone with the power to change the story said my father's name without disgust. "Antonio Vitale did not betray us," he said. The kitchen seemed to lose its air. A server covered her mouth. The line cook went still with a pan in his hand. Even the bodyguards near the door looked toward me, not like I was staff, not like I was trouble, but like a piece of history had walked in wearing an apron. Salvatore's voice shook, but it did not break. "The night they came for me, Antonio fed me in secret. Bread. Soup. A coat. He hid me until my men could reach me. He gave me that lighter so I would remember who had stood with me when I had nothing." Rocco's face went gray again. Salvatore turned toward him. "And the lie came after. From Salvi blood. Men who needed Antonio blamed because they had already sold access to my table." Rocco snapped, "That was 20 years ago." Marco's hand tightened around his wrist by 1 silent inch. Rocco stopped talking. I stared at him. At the manager who had watched me count quarters for bus fare. Who had cut my shifts when my mother got sick. Who had printed a confession with my name before he even knew what story would fit. "You knew," I said. Rocco looked at me with hatred stripped bare. "I knew enough to keep you in your place." There it was. Not an apology. Not full truth wrapped in pretty words. Something worse. A reason. He had not hated me because I was guilty. He had hated me because my name was dangerous if anyone finally listened. Marco released his wrist like it was dirty. Then he picked up the printed confession from the prep table. Rocco lunged for it, but one of Marco's men stepped in front of him. Marco read the top line. "My name. Theft of cash from private dining room. Admission of guilt." His eyes moved to Rocco. "You tried to make her bury herself with your pen." "She's an employee," Rocco said. "I was handling an internal matter." "No," Marco said. "You were continuing an old one." He tore the paper once. Then again. The sound was small, but it moved through me like a door opening. Pieces of the confession fell into the trash beside the prep station. Consequence 1. My name would not sit under that lie. Marco turned to the staff watching from the kitchen. "Listen carefully," he said. "Nina Vitale is not accused of theft in this house. Her father, Antonio Vitale, is not to be called traitor under my roof again." My breath caught so hard it hurt. Consequence 2. The name I had spent years swallowing had been placed back into the room with honor. Rocco backed toward the hallway. Marco did not chase him. He did not need to. "Your keys," Marco said. Rocco froze. The restaurant. The office. The private room. Rocco's mouth twisted. "You're firing me over a waitress?" Marco stepped close enough that Rocco finally understood what everyone else already had. I'm removing a Salvi who sold access to my family table and used my restaurant to punish the daughter of the man who saved my father. Rocco's hand shook as he pulled the keys from his pocket. They hit the prep table beside the lighter. Consequence 3. The room saw which object stayed and which man was being removed. Marco looked to his men. Take him downstairs. He waits for the council. No calls. No favors. No back door. Rocco's face broke open with panic. Marco, come on. We can talk. We are done talking around her. That was when I almost cried. Not when Rocco was taken by both arms. Not when the kitchen staff stepped away from him like they were no longer afraid of his shadow. Not even when Salvatore reached for my hand with fingers cold and fragile as paper. I almost cried because Marco had not said for her. He had said around her. As if the crime had not only been what they did to my father. It had been every year they spoke over his daughter. Salvatore pressed the lighter into my palm, but did not let go yet. Your father gave me my life, he said. We gave him shame. That ends tonight. Marco stood beside his father, his face carved from restraint and something heavier than regret. Then he looked at me, not as a waitress caught in his world, but as the woman who had carried the truth into it. Nina, he said, when this room is cleared, you decide what happens next. After Rocco was taken downstairs, the restaurant did not feel victorious. It felt exhausted. The dinner plates in the private room had gone cold. Espresso cups sat untouched beside folded napkins. In the kitchen, the torn pieces of that fake confession still rested in the trash, and Rocco's keys lay on the prep table where everyone could see them. That was the first real thing justice gave me. Not money. Not revenge. A set of keys that no longer belonged to the man who had tried to make my name smaller than his lie. Marco sent everyone else out with a few quiet words. No speeches. No celebration. Just the firm, controlled order of a man who understood that dignity did not return through noise. Then it was only me, Marco, and Salvatore Bellomo under the amber lights of the empty dining room. Salvatore sat at the table where I had first carried the espresso tray. He held my father's lighter between both hands like it was something holy and breakable. I should have looked harder, he said. His voice was thin. But he did not look away from me. I should have asked why the man who saved me disappeared under shame. I had waited years to hear someone powerful say my father had mattered. But when it came, it did not feel like triumph. It felt like a child inside me finally unclenching her fists. Salvatore placed the lighter in my palm. This time, he let go. Antonio Vitale was a good man, he said. And his daughter stood where grown men were afraid to stand. I closed my fingers around the silver until the worn edge pressed into my skin. Marco stood a few feet away, not close enough to crowd me, not far enough to abandon me. I can make sure no one here touches your job, your pay, or your safety, he said. But I won't decide your life for you. That was when I looked at him. Really looked. All night, people had tried to name me before I could name myself. Thief. Temporary. Traitor blood. Poor girl. Nobody. Marco did not give me a new name. He gave me space to keep my own. What do you want, Nina? He asked. The candle on the table had gone out during all the shouting. I picked up my father's lighter, turned the little wheel, and watched the flame struggle once before it caught. Small. Stubborn. Mine. I touched it to the wick. I want to finish my shift, I said. Not because I have to hide. Because my name belongs in this room now. Marco bowed his head once, like he accepted the terms. And for the first time in 20 years, Vitale was not a warning. It was a light.